Hello, welcome to the family interview series. We're beginning with the patriarch of the Hazel family, Philip Gadsden Hazel. How you doing?
All right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came into this world?
I don't really remember it too well.
What were the circumstances as you were told?
Well, let's see. Uh, I don't think I was ever really told. They, they didn't find me in a trash heap anyway.
Well, you
I
know,
think
who
I
were
was.
your, let me get this a little bit. Who were your parents and you were the firstborn,
Or I was
obviously.
the firstborn of Philip Gadsden Hazel Sr. and Frances Douglas Hayne Hazel, the mother, and was the first grandchild of Dr. James Adams Hayne and Frances Douglas Thorne Hayne.
Two Douglases in there, huh?
Yeah.
But I'm named for Douglas on the other side.
No.
Oh, for the
Your name, Doug, is named for that Douglas, which is 2S Douglas,
Oh,
which
that's
in the South Carolina clan, the 2S Douglas is supposed to be a notch above the 1S Douglases. And Doug's mother claims that's not really true because she has a 1S Douglas in her family somewhere.
that's part of her.
Part of her.
We'll call it what do you call it? Familial inferiority complexes.
Right. But anyway, when I was born, I was told I reigned supreme for about 3 years as the only grandchild and only child of the crew that I just named. And then my uncles and aunts started, and my parents started providing a lot of competition. And before you know it, I had 21 first cousins on my mother's side, and let's see, 9 first cousins on my dad's side, scattered about the state of South Carolina. And it made for quite a gathering of the clan when we met for holidays.
I guess. So you were born in 1926?
1926, September 30th in the fall, when the great leaders of the world were born in the fall usually. And I'm told the sensitive, smart, brilliant leaders of the world are born in the spring. So I wandered over the country till I found somebody qualified and married her to get that balance in the family. And Doug has that balance. A famous fall leadership and spring sensitivity.
Dinner's ready. Oh, you
Yeah.
Are we almost done?
Yeah, we're just about done.
Thank you, Teresa.
It must be a long
We're,
interview.
So you were a child of the Depression, basically.
That's right, yeah. I grew up where everybody around me was poor, so I thought the world was poor. And we kids sort of entertained ourselves, were ignored by the adults usually. Wore a lot of hand-me-down clothes, made a lot of our own toys, and
did you have to go hungry ever?
no, fortunately, hominy grits and fatback were very cheap. No, the staple of growing up was hominy grits.
Did you ever
And
not
you could
have,
eat anything with them.
did you have to wear the same shoes with holes in for 5 years or something like that?
Well, we only wore shoes in cold weather, so we didn't worry too much about shoes. We much preferred going barefoot.
Did you have to work as a when you were
No, not really until I was in high school, and then it was mainly babysitting. And my brother and I would have odd jobs of raking lawns and chopping kindling and selling it around the neighborhood. didn't really have to work because we didn't have to provide anything for ourselves except spending money for candy and pop. And you could buy enough candy for a nickel, you'd be sick for 3 days.
So that the depression didn't really affect you personally that much? It was...
No, it didn't seem like a depression because everybody was in the same boat more or less. So people made do with what they had and helped each other out in hard times. And there were a lot of, well, my grandparents had a farm in the country, so there were a lot of fresh vegetables and farm products were passed on through the family from the country. And it was a good time. The fathers back in those days worked 6 days a week, so they didn't have a lot of time off. And mother worked very hard with all of us kids, washing clothes in the tub and doing all the cooking and house cleaning. Stayed pretty busy. And so people were too busy to get in much mischief, although we boys managed to do a few exciting things over the years that if my kids did that, as they were growing up, it would have scared the hell out of them. We managed to come through all right.
No.
What? Don't tell me what you did. So I'm not a
You
great
had a
one.
pretty good childhood?
Oh, absolutely. No real complaints. And I had no desire to grow into adulthood, to tell you the truth. I didn't see that the adults had any advantages over we kids, so I stayed a kid as long as possible.
And you, okay, we're gonna take a pause now.
All right.
And then we'll get into your formative years. Okay, what do you have any like one most memorable experience from your childhood or something like that? The most amazing thing?
Well, no, I had kind of uneventful childhood.
Did you meet any amazing?
Didn't meet
Or
any
see
amazing.
any amazing thing or do any amazing thing?
Well, some interesting things from it. Being interested in engineering. My dad worked on the build-up of the Santee Cooper hydroelectric plant. And so he took me down in, when they were building these big turbines and all, went way down inside the turbines where the big impellers were and saw the dam when they were actually damming the river there after they built the earth dam and they got to the point where they had to stop the river. This big crane was throwing granite blocks bigger than automobiles into the river trying to dam up the flow, and you could watch the current just tumbling these big blocks downstream. And it looked to me like they weren't going to ever stop the river, but they threw enough in that it stopped it up. And then they built the dam, and then after the river was backed up, all the fish that used to come up the river to spawn further upstream would gather at the base of the dam. And some of the greatest bass fishing I ever got into in my life. You could,
Striped bass?
wide, largemouth bass.
They come out the river?
Yeah, they came out the river. I didn't know they migrated.
I didn't think
They-
largemouth bass.
They might have been
They
striped.
stayed
I
in the
wasn't that persnickety about what kind of fish in those days. If it bit my line, you reeled it in. Anyway, you could throw any kind of fishing plug or anything in the water, the fish would strike it. And so it's a lot of fun. The only thing that fish that wouldn't strike were these long garfish that like float around up on the surface and they wouldn't strike. They're kind of strange looking things. But that was a lot of fun. And so I was having a lot of fun in growing up, doing hunting and fishing and loafing around and enjoying my childhood.
And that was in Columbia.
That was in Columbia, and I'd stay with my great aunt up in the upper part of the state at Blackstock.
Did you ever
Go
go
to
to Charleston?
Congaree.
much?
Oh yeah, I had cousins in Charleston, so in the summer, I would come down and spend a couple of weeks with them at Coburg, which is right on the water, and there's a dairy, so drank chocolate milk till it came out of my ears. And went crabbing and shrimping and fishing and sailing and boating and had a great time. So in the midst of all this, the dumb country went to war, and the Navy decided they would like my services. Or really, I decided that the Navy needed my services. So I joined the Navy when I was 17 and was lucky enough that they decided they'd send me to college because they wanted me to be a
But you had
officer.
graduated from high school at 17?
At 16.
How did you do that?
Well, we only had 11 grades, and when I went through school, if you got too far ahead of your class, they bumped you up a half a year. So I skipped half of the second grade and half of the fourth grade, and was cruising along through school and went through 11th grade, and then it turned out I was only 16. So when I first tried to join the Navy, I wasn't old enough to get in that program till I was 17. So I started to college on my own.
So what were you doing? You were out of school for a while before you started?
That summer.
Okay.
And
Wait,
last
wait,
summer
you said
going
something, you don't
barefooted.
think we should have gone to war?
Well, yeah, I thought that, you know, the bad Germans and Japs. And
You just think it was a war in general?
Yeah,
The way you said it was
now,
like,
at the time, I thought, oh, great, the damn thing's gonna be over before I can get in and have fun. But, you know, as I get older, it's a dumb way to spend your resources having war. But anyway, I was keen to go to sea and be on a ship and sail the 7 seas like some of my ancestors. And so I wanted to go to Annapolis. And so I took a competitive exam to go to Annapolis. And I was an alternate, and then the principal went that time. And then I went into the Navy and got in this V-12 program with like NROTC. And I'd already started to the University of South Carolina and was finishing up my freshman year and went into this program there in the Navy. And they just left me in school, and I put on a Navy uniform and kept going to school. It turned out I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, and the University of South Carolina didn't have that. And so the Navy was kind enough to transfer me over to Georgia Tech. First they were going to send me to Rensselaer Polytech up north. Now that scared the devil out of me because
somewhere
it's in New York, I think. Anyway, that scared me because the thought of going up in a bad Yankee land in cold weather was kind of terrifying. So I was very pleased to go to Georgia Tech. And that was about the first time I'd ever been out of South Carolina. So Atlanta was a great place with Rich's department store with escalators in it, and huge store with all kind of things in it, multiple floors. And Atlanta had these electric streetcar buses that ran around there, and they had all kind of wonderful things to do. And every time there would be some event, they always wanted a Navy unit to parade down the street. So I marched up and down Peachtree Street in uniform a number of times.
So did you date in college, or you were
Well,
serious
I was kind of
in your
bashful
studies?
about this dating bit, and I didn't really date until I was, let's see, the end of my junior year in college, I guess. My roommate that was serious with this girl in Atlanta that he was going with, and she had a cute younger sister, and he decided that I ought to date her, so I did. And kind of developed quite a crush on her that I tried to preserve as I later graduated and was commissioned in the Navy being sent to California. But that kind of fizzled out at that distance, which is probably just as well because she was still in high school. And
How old
so,
was she when you were dating?
oh, I guess she's about 17, but I wasn't, but 18. So, and so when I at Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech had this
So you were
accelerated
how old were you when you
program,
graduated?
and so we were going through college in, 3 years or something like that. We just went to school a year round. And so I graduated when I was 19 and commissioned in the Navy when I was 19. And sent off to
And now people
California.
take 5-6 years, you know, to get through that.
And so, but I was assigned out in the desert of California. And that's when I stepped off that train, and this was in July, they said, man, I stepped off the train in that hot air, and I said, man, this is terrible. So I found out the Navy was transferring this missile test unit that I'd been assigned to down to the coast at what's called Point Magoo. And I said, ooh, I'd like to go down there. So I was part of a group of 60 Navy personnel sent down to what had been a CB offloading base at Point Magoo to start developing the Point Magoo missile test range. And that was quite a wonderful assignment. They had a huge motor pool left over from the war, so each of us had a personal Jeep we drove around. And there was absolutely no military regimentation at all. We just sort of
You guys
had a
are
great
going
time.
out. Is that where you went out fishing with PT boats?
Yeah, they had at Port Juanita right nearby. They had these crash boats that they patrolled offshore.
Didn't they have like German subs kind of?
Yeah, you're right. And the fishing boats would come up. Well, we were suspicious at every light on a. There's a lot of fog then. Every time some boat would show up offshore, they're just seeking some shells out of the fog. We thought sure it was a Russian invasion. Because the war was over with the Germans and Japs.
Okay.
This was 46 by the time. The war was over in 45. But we were very suspicious of the
So
Russians.
you didn't actually make it into the war?
No, I was in the Navy during the war, but I was in training all the time. But we'd go, speaking of fishing in the PT boat, there was a crash boat, which was just like the PT boat. The people that would charter boats to go out to the islands fishing would leave about 2 in the morning, go on these boats that would chug out there. We'd go out about dawn and get on these PT boats and these great big Packard Marines engines in them, and we would take off out there at about 60 miles an hour with spray flying out 2 miles on each side. Pass all these fishing boats chugging along. We'd be first out to the island. But the problem
The
was,
fuel bill was.
oh, well, we had to pay for that. The Navy Recreation Department, because the Navy wasn't going to pay the fuel bill, at least supposedly we were paying for it. But the problem was we were all bachelors and we'd catch these huge red snappers.
Excuse me, your dog wants something.
I know. Can you just let him out?
No.
Interrupt the interview. Wait, we're gonna pause it. So you used to catch a lot of big fish?
Yeah, we catch these huge red snappers, and I forget what other kind of fish. And then the problem what do you do with them? And at first, our friends that had families, people that we'd met in the town of Oxnard and around there, they were delighted to have all these fish dumped on. After a while, they refused to accept them. So we had to
You
start.
couldn't eat them all yourself?
No, we didn't have any way of cooking them. We lived in the BOQ.
Oh,
You know, the bachelors got in the mess hall. They didn't want to be bothered with fixing fish for us.
I see.
You know, it says you want to cook them on the beach. But we used to have volleyball games on the beach. That's the first time I'd ever played volleyball on the beach that way, where you have a couple of people on each side, and that's what they do there at the windjammer. That's fun to watch them. You can dive for the ball. And so that was great sport. And then the first missile we had to test at Point Magoo were copies of the German V1 Buzz bomb. And what Ford Motor Company made them in this country, these models. And
Ford Motor?
yeah, they just copied the Germans. But what the Navy did was provide radio control of them. So the Germans just aimed them at the British Isles and let them go, bam, as long as it hit the island. But the Navy wanted to guide them to hit a ship. So the Navy added this radio control to them so we could track the ship, the radar, and track this missile and guide it to hit the ship was the idea. But the Navy's held on catapulting things off the ground up to flying speed. So they had this 150-foot catapult with 7 or 8 powder charges down, and this piston would go down this, and every time it passed, one of these powder charges would go off, and that would accelerate it. By the time the missile got to the end of this ramp, it was going about 150, 200 miles an hour, which was flying speed. But every time we'd fire one of these things, it'd go off the end of the ramp, and then it'd do like this, and bam, crash into the water. And we had a hell of a time figuring out what was wrong. Finally, we brilliant engineers went out of school. Most of the more senior guys that we were working with were Navy pilots. It may have been history majors, no telling what they had been or whatever. But they were senior to us. So we engineers got together and decided we'd make some measurements. We found out every time one of those powder charges went off, it was about a 20G acceleration on this missile. And these electronic circuits for the autopilot in there, the tubes were just flying out of the sockets. By the time it got to the end of the ramp, the electronics wasn't working at all to control it. So it just was like a rock going off the end of the ramp. So it took a while.
Yeah, I mean, it was like ex-Nazi guys working with
Well, later we did, actually. We did have a bunch of electronics ones, the ones that were signed upon.
Who was the big guy?
Braun. Yeah, Braun. He went down to White
Max
Sands.
Braun? No, what's his name?
Willie Braun, I think. Anyway, he went with the Army down at White Sands. The Navy got the electronic German. It was kind of interesting. They were assigned to the base. They weren't allowed to go. And so they lived in the BOQ with us, and I got real friendly with this one older guy that he asked me to edit his technical papers he wrote because he wasn't that good in English. So here I am.
So what was the general feeling towards these guys?
Well,
were the
being
people who lost like family and friends.
yeah, you felt kind of sorry for them. Later they were allowed to bring their family and all that, but
I felt sorry for them, really.
yeah, because they were obviously sharp engineers, and it was kind of fun meeting and talking. But we sort of looked at them in awe. We didn't think that much about. And later we thought about the fact they were isolated from their families, and they lost the war, and they contributed to doing a lot of horrible things. But it didn't look like they individually did. The stuff they did over there was all engineering stuff away, and they were way ahead of us in missile development and whatnot. So it's kind of interesting to talk with them and meet them. But after working on that program for a while, the Navy is developing this new anti-aircraft missile that I was assigned to, and part of the testing of that was up at Yeager, up in the desert again, although we ran the program out of Point Magoo. So I was assigned as the project engineer working with the civilian contractors that built the missile and were testing it up at Yeager. So I would commute back and forth on a weekly basis from Point Magoo up to Yeager, and then I'd work with the civilian developer. One was Convair out of San Diego, and the other was a group out of Fairchild, working with applied physics lab back east. And the guy in charge of the Convair group was quite interesting. He was an ex P-40 pilot with the Flying Tigers in Japan. So he and most of his staff had been all ex-Navy pilots, and all of them had the hangar flying we did with that group was really great. So I had a new Chevy pickup truck assigned to me for running back and forth up there, so that was kind of nice.
Oh, I never knew you had a
Couple
truck.
years. Yeah, all my own. So that was a fun assignment. And then I wanted to get flight training in the Navy, and I kept applying for flight training. And I kept passing, and then finally it looked like I was going to go. And then I turned down on my eyes on the final physical exam. They're always very marginal. And so I didn't get to go. And I said, I'm not interested in staying in the Navy if I can't fly. So I got out, and I decided in the work I was doing with the missiles and all, man, the future is in electronics. You got to know something about electronics if you want to do anything in engineering, missile development or whatnot.
Grace has to go to bed and she wants to go and play hide and seek first. I've been promising her all day.
All right, I'll be right there.
Nice. Yeah, we'll take my break.
Okay.
How long does this interview last?
Okay, we're rolling.
All right. So anyway, I wanted flight training and couldn't get it. The Navy was too persnickety about your health in those days to everybody. So I got out of the Navy and decided I'd go back to school since I'd accumulated a couple of years of GI college time, and I studied electronics. So I went back to Georgia Tech for two reasons. One, I hope to renew my relationship with my ex-girlfriend there, who then since
Who is
I
now
left
legal
now,
age?
now he graduated from high school. And the other reason was that I was able to get a teaching assistantship at Georgia Tech, which would supplement my GI Bill so I could live in fairly decent style. I got my master's degree in electronics. So it took me a couple of years to do that.
Electrical engineering?
Yeah, with
And you're,
especially an electronic rather than power, electrical power. Yeah, the choice going which way. But it was in electrical engineering, yeah.
so your bachelor's was in
Aero engineering. And to switch fields like that, I had to, where normally you could get a graduate degree in a year, I had to go back and take a lot of undergraduate EE courses before I could take the graduate courses, so it took a while. So anyway, that was a fun couple of years. And
what's the difference between electrical power and electronics, basically?
one, you work with tube circuitry, and the other you work with DC machinery,
Okay.
like generate a power plant, transmission lines, and things like that. I wasn't interested in that.
Now you don't work with tubes.
No.
Back then.
I don't work with subsonic airplanes. I don't work with anything. But anyway, that put me getting out. I'd gone back to graduate school in 1948, and then here I am getting out in 1950. And it turned out to be a glut of engineers on the market. Then there wasn't a hell of a lot of engineering going on. So there weren't very many job offers. I would have been better off to, when I got out of the Navy, to stay at Point Magoo and work in civil service for the government than go back to school. But anyway, beside the point. Anyway, I had two job offers. One is to go west to work with North American Aviation in their missile development program. And the other one was to go with General Electric in Alabama and work with them in their missile development program. And I thought, my memory of California, I'd spent a couple of years out there, was pretty good, so I decided I'd rather go with the aviation company out there, so I did. And lo and behold, after about 6 months, here I am working out in the desert again, up at in the Palmdale area and Edwards Air Base. And this time what I was working with was the ground control control system for tracking the missile. The missile we were developing was a intercontinental bomber type missile, but very large. And in the test phase, we'd fly it around up in the desert getting everything to work, and we'd control it by tracking it with a radar, and we had a radio command system that could fly it around like a model airplane. Of course, this thing flew at Mach 2, which was pretty fast model airplane. And then we landed on the lake bed up at Edwards.
What's that? How much is Mach 2?
About 1,500 miles an hour.
Oh, Mach is 750 miles
Right.
an hour. Okay. Right. Okay.
So anyway, that was a fun program. And being at Edwards in those days was fine, because that's when the Right Stuff crew was still up there.
Let me hear your story about the Chuck Yeager's plane.
Oh, well, I was working with all these pilots and mechanics and whatnot, and Chuck Yeager was still flying a test aircraft up in Edwards, and he was flying them for Bell Aircraft Company back in New York. And Bell, for some reason, decided they would give him a gift of a World War II trainer, so they got this PT-26 primary trainer that had been flown by the Canadians, and had something like 60 hours on it, Flint's new. It had just been sitting since then, so they worked it all over and gave it to Yeager back in New York. And Yeager flew it out to Edwards and parked it and said the damn thing was too slow for him, so he wanted to get rid of it. So he sold it. 4 of us bought it for $300. This trainer. And the guys, the other 3 guys beside me, one was an ex-Air Force pilot and flight instructor, and the other 2 were aircraft mechanics, and then there was me, and I happened to be the engineer in charge of these people. This guy that had been an Air Force pilot didn't have any formal training, but he was working with us as an electronic technician. He'd been a colonel in the Air Force training glider pilot. And in his younger days, he had an interesting history. His younger days, he'd run away from home at 16 or 17 and went with the movie company and learned to fly, and was a stunt pilot with Warner Brothers Studio before the war. So he had all these friends at Warner Brothers, and he'd take us down there through the sets. That was fun. But he's an interesting guy. So he taught me to fly in this trainer up in the desert. And then when this missile program was moving down to Florida in 1955, I'd sort of got a belly full of field test work and decided I wanted to do some more researchy kind of thing. So I decided I wouldn't go with Florida, and I shopped around, and University of Michigan was doing some interesting things, so decided to go to there. But before then, in 1952, after working up in the desert, living there and commuting back and forth between there and Long Beach, where I had an apartment with another bachelor on the beach, and I'd work in the desert all week and go to the beach on the weekend. I didn't like living in the BOQ at the Edwards Air Base, so one of my technicians had brought his family up to the desert and rented a home. And so I rented a room from him and stayed in it, and he had a couple of small kids in school, and one of them was in the 1st grade, and my future wife was her teacher. And they decided that most married couples don't like to see bachelors floundering around unattached, so they invited the teacher to Sunday dinner, and when I was there. And
So you knew she was coming, or?
Huh?
I mean, you know you're being set up, or you just?
No. Well, at first, she was nice,
and-
but the main interest that she had in going with me was we'd date up in the desert, and then she'd like to go back down to Los Angeles area on the weekends, because there wasn't much to do in the desert, so maybe go to a movie. And so I would give her a ride back down to Pasadena area where she lived, where her parents lived. Then I'd keep going on down to the beach. And so we got to know each other just because she was riding back and forth with me. And,
So you didn't have any romantic interest right away?
no, you know, it got so I got to know her mother, and when I'd drop her off, her mother would, after a while, say, "Oh, don't you want to come in and have some supper? Or, I just made a big pot of homemade soup. Don't you want a bowl of soup?" So after a while, I'd go in and be having a bowl of soup or something with her mother while Tilda was getting ready for her local date. And Zayd would come by and wonder who this joker was sitting there eating soup in the kitchen. But anyway, after a while it got a little more serious, and we decided that we would get hitched. So in the summer of...
So how did you propose to her? I don't think I ever heard this.
Oh, I don't remember exactly. I asked
You don't remember?
I asked her mother if you know, I thought you're supposed to get permission from the father, and that she didn't have a father, so I had to ask her about, would she okay us getting hitched? And mother said, well, yeah.
You hadn't asked her first?
Oh, yeah.
But how did you ask her?
I don't remember. I really don't remember the circumstances. We just got around to it, decided, gee, we kind of liked each other. And so, anyway,
You had dated how long? Or you'd known each other how long?
Probably about 6 months
That's
before
it,
we
huh?
decided to get married. There was another 6 months before I actually got married, but before I decided. And yeah, we
So
started.
how long in that 6 months did you watch you go out with other people before you started coming out?
3 or 4 months ago. You know, it was during one summer, the end of one summer, that we met each other, because she just started teaching up there when I guess not very long. So it'd be like in August or September we met. Then it's been about 3 months, we were quite interested in each other, and she was going to visit her aunt in Michigan for Christmas that year. And I said, well, why don't you come on down to South Carolina? I'm going home for Christmas and meet my family, which she did. She took the train down there, and then we flew from South Carolina back to California. So she got to meet the family then. And then I guess, I don't think we had decided to get married at that. Maybe we did. I don't remember when we decided. But anyway, it was said that we were going to get married in August of 53. And she was going back to school that summer to get her degree because she hadn't quite graduated when she finished college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She lacked some credit in something. So she went back to school that summer to get a credit. So she could...
That was at Santa Barbara?
Yeah.
City College?
Yeah. And so we got married in August of 53, and then we lived in base housing there at Edwards Air Base till it was the end of 54 that I got restless and decided I wanted to go elsewhere. So in the beginning of 55, I guess, that I decided to move to Michigan, but I guess it was around the 1st of April before we actually moved to Michigan. And we settled into Michigan and started raising a family.
So,
Stayed there.
you have a 50-year anniversary coming up, don't
Yeah.
In 3 years?
Too much longer,
you? 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah.
That's what? Gold, or what do they call
That would
it?
be the golden one.
That's the golden.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, in Ann Arbor, of course, I worked for the University of Michigan in their Willow Run Research Lab doing remote sensing. We're developing sensors for mapping the Earth, basically, from aircraft and space. And then Bendix opened a systems division in Ann Arbor, and they were doing some interesting work that I went with them. stuff to suit me that they're working on, so I left them and went back with the University of Michigan Research Labs after about 7 years. And back into this remote sensing work again. And then in '73, some of the students at the University of Michigan raising so much fuss about the university doing military research that the university got rid of their research labs, and the group of us that weren't really ready to quit working on what we were doing, so we formed a non-profit company called Yeager. I really kept on doing the same work with the same people, we just weren't on the university anymore. And when 1991 rolled around, I was 65, decided it's time to hang it up. So I retired and moved to South Carolina on the beach.
You get a watch or anything like that?
I got
They give you
a wooden plaque that said, you know, that I'd work for you. So I think it's useless. I never.
How many years did you work for?
Well, since, let's see, if you count the first time I was at the university for 3 or 4 years, and then if you count the Erim and university together, because the same people, I guess it was, except for the 7 years I was at Bendix, it was from 55 to 91. So what's that? About 45 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And they didn't even give you a watch?
No, but they had, the guys that I worked with were real good. They had a party for me, and they gave me that metal shrimp boat, you know, that's on the side. And they gave me, you know, they knew I was gonna have a boat and all when it came down there, so for some reason they gave me that all band radio with battery powered receiver that I've been left to you, and I never have done anything with it. I keep batteries in it in case we have a hurricane and odds and ends of things. And then since I was in charge of the flight facility, they did a flyover there in my party. They were out on the deck. So that was about the extent of that. And I've enjoyed my retirement. I don't miss working at all.
So what do you do mostly on your retirement? You volunteer a little bit?
Oh yeah.
Leaders?
I started out, since my cousin that I used to get together with in Charleston at the dairy was now doing farming, truck farming of vegetables and things. He's a Clemson graduate in agriculture and stuff. He says there's so much good food left in the fields after we finish our commercial harvest. He says, you know, you ought to organize some of these volunteer church groups and all come down, harvest this stuff and give it to the needy people, soup kitchen thing. And he said, we need somebody to kind of organize this, and because the farmers don't want like just anybody wandering into the field. They might not work on it, get the right stuff. So 3 or 4 of us that got together and formed this non-profit group to harvest this thing, and worked out a deal with the farmers. So we'd find out what they had available when, and then we'd organize these groups to go and harvest the stuff during the growing season. And so I've been doing that up until this last year. I didn't, for various reasons, didn't do any this last year, but before that, and I go out a couple of days a week during the harvest period with these groups from the different churches, lead them into the particular field. We'd box up the stuff and deliver it to the needy people.
Then you do the Meals on Wheels?
Yeah, then the other thing I got into from my association with doing food to the needy groups, I found out about this Meals on Wheels group, and I've been working with them. They package up these meals. The caterer actually prepares the meals in quantity, and the group of volunteers puts them in these individual packages, and they have some dozen or so routes of about 10 to 20 families each to deliver these meals to.
Have you ever tasted them?
No, I've eaten those. I nibble a cookie or something like that, but they look real good, and I've helped dip them up. What I'm on call when they have regular teams that do it on a regular basis, and I'm the on-call guy that when somebody can't show up for some reason, I've learned all the different routes, and I'm available to go down, and I get called at least once a week to deliver.
Oh, really?
And it's kind of fun because you really get to know the area around Mount Pleasant, there where I live. And if you ever feel low about your own situation, you go into some of these places that we deliver meals to. So many poor blacks living in little shacks and trailers up in the woods and all that, in sad shape, and so many of elderly blacks that have a lot of medical problems, like so many of them have had legs amputated, I guess, from diabetes and whatnot, And most of them are so appreciative of what you bring them. It makes you feel good helping them out like that. So I've been doing that, so that's 1 or 2 days a week. And then this year, in the course of getting rid of some surplus electronics that I had, I made contact with this guy that teaches electronics to high school students at the trade school in North Charleston. And he said, gee, I'd love for you to come in and help me with these kids teaching this. So I've been doing that 2 days a week this year.
You can take
Kinda
that
fun.
stereo back and see.
Yeah.
Keep that.
And I found out about this because I was getting rid of the old outboard that the gear stripped out. It was going to cost about as much to fix the new gears in as a new motor cost, and I didn't particularly like that motor anyway. So I was asking that the boat dealer, wasn't there somebody interested in taking something like that on and just fixing it on their own? He said, yeah, I don't know anybody, we might call the trade school up in North Charleston, which I did, and the guy said, oh yeah, we'd love it. So I took it up there and gave it to him. While I was there, I said, hey, you got anybody here that's interested in some old tube type electronics? He said, oh yeah, go down and talk to such and such down the halls, which I did. So all my old tube type audio equipment and all I gave to the people down there, and he was interested in it because he said, gee, these students have never seen anything with tubes in it. I just at the sideline, I'd like to show them what some of the old ones. And this instructor is a retired Navy submarine. He was in charge of electronic on submarines for years before he retired, so he's the one teaching that. So between gleaning and Meals on Wheels and electronics, teacher's aid, and keeping the house in speech and repair, and doing a little traveling now and again.
You don't make it out fishing much,
No, fun fishing by yourself, and I'm such a loner, I haven't made any fishing friends around me.
You want to say goodnight to Grandpa? Just give me a kiss.
Come here, give me a hug.
Here,
Give me a hug. Oh, Gracie, Gracie, Gracie. Go to bed and get a good night's sleep so you can get up early in the morning. We're going to be leaving early tomorrow, and I want to see you well early. Tell you goodbye, okay?
That's right.
Well, we might just duck out without eating breakfast even.
We'll have some coffee with you.
We'll have some coffee with you tomorrow. Okay?
Okay. I'll be in there. I'll say goodnight.
No, Daddy wants to put me.
So what was the biggest challenge you've gone through in your life? That your medical thing?
Hell, no, that's just something to take into mind. Well, the biggest challenge is is maintaining a happy marriage. I guess is the biggest challenge. On occasions, they've been
Yeah.
like, oh, the biggest challenge, or the biggest failure that I got, that preys on the bit is you know, you like some things in your family turn out a little different than the way you did, and so you think back, if I'd done this instead of that, it might have made a difference. But being pretty much a fatalist, I'm not sure that things would have been any different. I mean, you never do things as well or as thorough, as complete, or as smart as it's possible to do it, but at the time you do what you think is best.
You do the best.
And I don't know how you can ask for much more than that, and it certainly doesn't go back and cry with spilt milk. I don't agonize, but I spend a lot of thought thinking in advance about what I want to do, or making up my mind on something. But once I make up my mind, that's it. And there's no point in worrying about it. That you can't go back and change it. You might give some idle thought to you. Might, if I'd done something different, might be done different, resulted differently. But see, you have so many times in life that you can go this way or that way, or do this or do that, if you worry about looking back on them and trying to fit them together in some different
So
way.
you don't, not necessarily that subject, but do you have any regrets or like big decisions that, like things you wish you'd done that you didn't do, more towards personal fulfillment rather than just
No, I've always,
responsibility.
I've given the priority in what I do. I wanted to do work that I like to do, that I thought was worthwhile doing. And as long as I made enough money to pay the bills and I didn't feel stressed out about meeting the next one coming up, I never had any ambition to make a lot of money or have a lot of fancy equipment or whatnot. I always thought it was better to have friends that had those kind of things that you enjoy without the stress of it. So it's fun. I learned to fly and owned a couple of different airplanes over my life, but I never spent that much time with them. It's just, when you're raising a family, it seems like the hobby things always keep putting them secondary priority, and you don't get to do them very much. And of course, if you're more dedicated to them, you can make more time for it, but it always seemed like, well, I'm going to get around to doing that next weekend or next week or whatnot.
Now you don't have an excuse.
Yeah, I don't have an excuse, but I don't have anybody around to do it with me. There's not much fun to do much right. So I have boats and all that essentially sit under the house I seldom use. And I'm content just to lead an easy life. Enjoy good food and do a little traveling now and again.
Do you have any goals for the future? What things you want to do?
Well, I want to do a little bit more traveling than I've been doing of late. But it's kind of hard. It's so comfortable and enjoyable where we live. It's kind of hard to work up steam to go roaring off somewhere.
Yeah.
Although there are places I'd like to visit, but I don't feel this tremendous urge to necessarily do it. And I can't think of. I'm at the stage of life where I'm more or less content to enjoy what I have. I'm not that keen on acquiring anything much new and different. But Tilda would like to do a lot more traveling. She's got itchy feet to go. But
You kind of need somebody.
You're still interviewing?
yeah, he just
What?
never talks to that.
Are you
No, we're
going
just
on-
wrapping it up here.
Yeah, I just retired, so
Any last words of wisdom? Something you'd like to pass on to your, your offspring or your family, like something that you've learned in your 74, what are you, 74?
74.
74 years?
Yeah, I don't know. It's, enjoy your family.
Be nice to your wife.
Yeah, that helped, yeah. But it doesn't hurt to have a little squabble now and again, because I found the making up after the squabble is worth the squabble every time.
Yeah, we don't have to really work on grand squabble.
So, no, I don't have any great words of wisdom to pass on.
Okay. Signing